Ed sits down at the desk this morning and I'm like, Ed, how are you? How was Glastonbury? And then he launches into this story about how The Guardian kept selling out at Glastonbury.
Oh no, because The Guardian were tricking people with the nice bags they make.
Yeah.
That was
tote
it.
bags.
Yeah. They make nice bags.
Everyone needs a tote bag.
Yeah. And it was really nice. And you get it for £3. Then now The Guardian can go and be like, Glastonbury sold. Glastonbury goers love The Guardian, which they probably do, but it's quite a dishonest way of bumping up the metrics.
But as someone who does like go to Glastonbury this year, I haven't, and I felt very smug because the conversation has been it's extremely middle class to go, and it's very there's been there's a lot of sneering from the Glastonbury goers on people who go to Benidorm or whatever.
You're famously in favour of fun.
I am famously famous for
You're like, as in like,
I do love fun.
On like your social media, you're always quite pro fun, like especially when it comes to the sesh.
Yeah.
Shall we say? What do you make of that stuff about people were being criticised for like, oh, you say there's a cost of living crisis on, but you're going to Glastonbury?
I just think it's just another way for, like kind of dour, kind of like right-wing personalities to basically just stick the boot in again. I mean, like the idea that it's like somehow in any way to do with the cost of living crisis is just totally insane. It's like, I think the whole thing is it's getting harder and harder to like kind of keep up this charade that it's like, charade or charade? How do you say that?
I say both.
Oh, right, okay. It's kind of hard for these people to keep up this idea and convince everyone that there's a section of society that are still having a smug, like nice time whilst they're struggling and having a bad time. Because I think now with the cost of living crisis and all the other shit that the Tories have just been pillaring like the whole of society with, it's like there's not really much more room for everyone to be convinced that somebody else is having a good time. And I think the Glastonbury thing is like it's an easy scapegoat kind of thing because it literally is people having a good time actively, and you can see it. And obviously, so I think people are like, well, they're having a good time whilst we're all struggling. And it's like, well, actually, it's like the tiniest, briefest like glimpse of like nice time in this otherwise completely brutal and relentless like country that we're living in, like conditions that we're living in, like and everyone knows that no one's, especially young people as well, especially even like young middle class, the whole idea that it's just middle class people, like the middle class people were getting the idea that middle class, it's just middle class people anyway is ridiculous. But it's like, even if it was just middle class people, that kind of section of society is getting massively eroded anyway. Like the difference between rich and the poor is becoming so huge that there really is no middle class, or there's going to be very soon not much middle class left. So this whole kind of like classic scapegoat of being like, oh, they're just kind of like middle class Guardian readers who are still having a really fun time while else never struggling. It's like, I think that's just complete bollocks because everyone knows now that everyone's fucking struggling except for the very, very, very rich people like at the very top. Everyone's having a fucking bad time. And if you want to spend like basically the last fucking bits of money that you have on having a good time because everything else is so relentlessly shit, then why the fuck would that be a problem? Like why would you judge someone to do that anyway? Like it's like, okay, but yeah, they spent 340 quid on Glastonbury and then to have a nice time because everything else is so relentlessly bad. Yeah. They should be able to do that to take the fucking edge off like living in this fucking country basically.
And there's like that tiny kind of little like that little slither in the middle of like people, I guess, who are our age, who go and they have a lot of money but have liberal ideas. And then that kind of tiny slither is used to represent like every single person that goes there.
You can one, save money, or if you have the ability to save money, you can save up for Glastonbury, etc.
That's a fucking good point because they always make that argument that if we just put a bit of money away, we'd be able to save a deposit. So like maybe we're just being a bit pragmatic and just putting a little bit away.
Also, you don't need to go and spend that much money, and you can bring all your own food, you can bring all your own booze. Obviously, that costs money.
You can do it cheap, and also like a lot of my mates work there, and they like they work for their ticket, and then they sleep in their car and all this stuff. Like it doesn't have to be expensive. And I feel like this whole idea where people were saying it costs like $1,000 or whatever.
I saw that.
It's like, that's a crazy number. Where's that coming from?
Lee Anderson thought it cost? Lee Anderson genuinely like they're spending £26,000. And he said it earnestly.
It's incredibly like that thing in, what is it? Arrested Development, where it's like, how much can a banana cost? Like, whatever. It's like, it's so much like that because they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about anyway. They're just coming out with random numbers and then...
Also, they don't know what it is because they've never been.
Because they've never been. So this whole, and then obviously it's very easy to like sneer at it when you haven't been. I mean, I was fucking sneering at it I mean, I'm sneering at it right now. I hate it. I hate everyone at Glastonbury. I hate everyone having a good time. I want to be having a good time. Because I wasn't there. That's what I'm saying. I wasn't there. Even me not being there this year, I was like, fuck everyone at Glastonbury. But obviously, you know, when I'm there, I'm like, fucking yeah, this is the best thing ever.
You did say something funny this morning, though, and I did actually really laugh at it. Or maybe it was yesterday. You were like texting all my friends at 9 a.m.
Yeah, I was. I actually was texting all my mates being like, are we still friends? Because you've been at Glastonbury for a long time and you haven't messaged me back. And I've been sending some pretty emotional messages. I've been pretty sober this whole weekend. You haven't really been messaging me back.
No one said anything about your new notch in the belt. No one said anything
about supporting me in my jiu-jitsu journey. And I feel pretty...
They're sitting sweating in a 45-degree tent.
Yeah, no, like, they're all having a bad time.
They're not eating in like 3 days.
Yeah.
What's that really crap thing that when you're a reporter, like the first job that you get to do is like when it gets hot, there's a heat wave in London, like your editor will send you down to the tube to like measure the temperature of the tube. And it just seems to kind of be like, for some reason, an activity that every single reporter has ever had to do. Frying eggs, that kind of thing.
That was basically me and my whole internship at Vice. So they just basically made me do that for 3 months.
Just sit on the central line measuring the temperature.
Various wacky things because they knew that I would just do anything basically. But yeah,
it's a good place to be. and now you're here, so great career choices. We've got so what I was actually trying to say about Glastonbury was not whether or not it was fine that I went, and it was fine, and I had the best time. But I want to talk about the drug testing on site has been banned, and now a group of MPs and Fatboy Slim have written to the Home Office to criticise the decision for blocking on-site drug testing at festivals. I think Parklife tried to arrange it and they couldn't, essentially.
Which they absolutely should do at Parklife.
Oh yeah, they should do it everywhere.
Yeah,
but
especially the places where they're going to be like younger people, basically. Because I mean, not that it's going to be any better if you're older, but I think people in there like. People that go to Glastonbury generally tend to be slightly older, I guess, like in their like late 20s to mid 30s or whatever. Or there is generally like an older crowd who are slightly more experienced with drugs. But like obviously the bad times with the drugs is usually when it's young people who have no idea what the fuck they're doing, and then they'll like take a pinger or take a half, and then they'll not feel anything, then they'll take another, and then that's when all the bad stuff happens, basically. But yeah, the drug testing is quite weird because it's such a harmless thing for them to do. So why would they somehow be against that? It's like, what are you harming? Who? I don't know if, obviously, I mean, we're just such a regressive country in loads of ways, but like the thing I think we're going to really be like the odd man out in Europe and maybe even the world soon in terms of our attitude towards like drugs and like legalization and even like weed and stuff. Obviously we're doing CBD and like, and kind of medical marijuana and stuff like that. But I feel like the way that we're still, our attitudes, I don't know, because like functionally, it feels like, sometimes it feels like functionally, the way that people do take drugs in this country is so kind of, it's so fucking rowdy that like, it doesn't feel like there is much kind of policing in it. But then I think that's kind of more because that is like a class thing where, you know, like certain classes get to basically have their fun with drugs and then other classes get penalized for basically supplying those drugs.
And that's the CBD comes into it. Because think about like, you know, like that Trip brand that's been coming out, like that
drink or whatever.
Yeah, the drink with CBD oil in it or whatever it's got in it. And it's like, it was marketed in these like really pretty pastel pink cans. It's like quite expensive for a drink, and it was like it first came out like in Soho House, like which is which is like a ridiculous private members club that none of us here would ever be members of.
Lying again.
Ed's in it.
I'm not.
But anyway, it's just like the pretty packaging of all of it, and it's like this is a drink that is like, you know, marketed at the middle classes, people with a little bit of money who live in Clapham, and absolutely could not be used for like cancer patients on the end of like live treatment who want just like a fucking like, you know, bit of respite.
What I think is actually quite mad is by blocking these sites. So what they're actually blocking is back of house testing. So if you bring in pills and the police find it and confiscated, they test it in back of house, like on site. It's not front of house testing, which is where you come say and go to the loop. Right. And try and get your drugs tested to see if there's like anything lethal in it. It's like after the fact testing almost. And then when they find like a dodgy pill, like we found fake, I think orange SoundClouds or something, and they can send out a notice that says this contains, which it saves lives. And like, I remember, I think one year at Tea in the Park, it was like green Rolexes was like the big big killer. So
they've had some ones because I think what happens basically with pingers especially. not that I would know anything about this, but basically it's like you get like a press that's like really popular, or really good, or really strong from like the initial press in Amsterdam, or basically wherever it comes from. I don't know where it would come from, but basically you get one really good pinger, and it's like it's the fucking bang bang, and everyone goes mental for it. And then basically that pinger then everyone clocks it, all the dealers clock it, so they start doing dodgy presses of those pingers, and they start cutting it with really bad shit. So there was a time when basically blue punishers were like the fucking main one that were getting over from Amsterdam. And basically they were so good, and they became like ubiquitous as like the go-to massive pinger. They were like 300 mg, which is like obviously it's like a third of a gram of MD in one pinger. So obviously it's like hench, and like it's really good. But then obviously what happens is that they started cutting that with, I can't remember what they cut it with, that stuff that basically when you take it, they cut it with something that was like basically lethal.
Wasn't there rat poison in it? It's the equivalent, or something that goes into rat poison.
Yeah, it was like this thing where it's like if you take it for, basically you can take
fentanyl.
Yeah, I don't know if it was fentanyl, but it was something on that level where people were taking it and then nothing was happening. So then they take more and more and more, and then the dose that they would end up taking from taking more and more and more, if they'd just taken like half, it wouldn't have fucked them over. But because nothing was happening, then they take more and more and more, and then basically when it actually eventually hits them, because it's super slow release, I think it was like an hour, like 2 hours or something, release this chemical, and then it would just basically kill them, or like totally fuck them over.
And then a 15-year-old is obviously going to do that.
That's what I'm saying. So that's why I'm saying someone like Parklife, or the places where there's a lot of younger students or uni people, it's totally ridiculous. It's almost like a safety issue that they're not doing that, because obviously not everyone's going to test it. But if you're like a young responsible adult, which I think most people actually generally are in Gen Z, they're like a lot more like health conscious and stuff, then I think they would be up for testing it. So it does seem a bit like of a neglect, like a safety, like a neglect of safety.
It's just entirely, it's so just counterintuitive, being like, oh, just the person's attitude to drugs and stuff is so regressive and so just.
It's an import from America, though, isn't it?
I don't think
but
it is.
even in America,
British conservatism, isn't it?
Even in America, they've got like the weed is now legal in loads of places and stuff like that. So even they have starting to like relax, and they're starting to make loads of money off it and all this stuff. So it does just seem like really weird that we're not even like,
especially when public perception or public opinion of it is so much further than where the government's opinion on it. It's literally the only person really against it is like Priti Patel and Suella, that kind of like legacy.
I think it's so like the Tory voters in the hamlets who own guns for some reasons. Yeah. They won't be like, have you heard what they're letting the young people do? They're feeding drugs to my dog. It's like they're constantly trying to appease this like the most mental person in England.
But it's like that the moral panics, like the moral panics are getting so loud, and they're getting ever increasingly like more ratcheted up, the noise levels, that it's becoming like impossible to do anything positive, because anything positive is now seen as essentially, I mean, I don't want to get into all of that, but I feel like basically the whole, it's like anything left wing now is seen as almost like the like kind of devil incarnate, basically. So anytime there's any kind of thing progressive, there's such a right wing kind of like static noise that kind of gets like chucked at it straight away, that it becomes impossible to do anything. And I think now the way that politics is that they're essentially, as you're saying, appealing to the most insane person in the room at all times, because anything else other than that will just get like ridiculed or kind of like be toxic for your numbers, I guess, which seems crazy.
Like identifying as a cat.
Yeah.
That was an unreal
segue.